Big shout out to Angie and Sukuthra for helping us host today. And want to definitely say thank you to the ladies who are about to speak. I'll introduce them in 1 second. And my big helper, Lauren, as well as others at Coinbase who helped put this together. So I'll go ahead and introduce our panel for tonight. First up, we have Kristen Sue. She works in our business development team. Next up, we have Preeti. She is a software engineer. Next up, we have Sarah Hody. She works on our legal team. And best but not last, we have Jane, who is also a software engineer on our mobile team. I will turn it over to these ladies.
All right, can you hear me? Awesome. Super excited to have so many people here today join us. We're excited to talk about Coinbase, Bitcoin, and any other questions that you have. So first, I'll give you an introduction of like the Bitcoin ecosystem in case anyone is kind of unfamiliar with it, and then we'll do intros, and then we'll go into. I'll ask as a panelist, I'll ask them some questions, and then we can finalize with Q&A. So to start off, as you all know, Bitcoin is a global payment network that offers the ability to transfer value anywhere in the world for low cost. Just like on the internet, we transfer bits. With Bitcoin, it lets us transfer value. And so you can think of Bitcoin as like a shared public ledger or a globally viewable spreadsheet where any participant in the network can see when value has been transferred from one person to another. And so let's say you have two people like Alice and Bob, and these are often like two people that are commonly known, like Alice and Bob are two common names when you're explaining Bitcoin for some reason. Let's say Alice wants to send 5 Bitcoin to Bob. She broadcasts that message with the accounts, the amounts and the accounts, and then every node in the network receives that message and they update their ledger and pass along that message. So there's two important things that I'll just talk about. One is how does that message actually get authenticated? Like how do we know it's actually Alice sending that money? Well, in Bitcoin world, we have something called the digital signature, and it's based on two types of keys, a public key and a private key. And how it works is like you can think of the private key as like your personal passport that only you know, and then you create a digital signature with using that private key. And the public key is like your address that people send money to. And so let's say I want to send you Bitcoin, I'll send it to your public address. And so to spend any money that you have to prove that you're the owner of the public key by generating a digital signature using the transaction message and your private key. Then the network uses that signature and a message to put it through another function and generate the corresponding public key, and that's how they know that's you. And so that's how it works in terms of authentication. And then also there's something called the blockchain, which helps us manage the order of the transactions and what order they happened. And so we typically place the transactions in groups of blocks, and that's why it's called the blockchain. And basically it's kind of to keep track of how the ownership of the Bitcoin changes. And each block references to a previous block and a previous block all the way to the first transaction that ever happened in the network. So that's a brief introduction. We can go into more detail as we kind of go through the talk. But first, I want to start off by making sure everyone introduces themselves, starting with Jane. Okay.
Hi, I'm Jane. I am a mobile developer at Coinbase. Before Coinbase, I was doing my own startup, making commercial drones, and I learned that hardware was hard. So at Coinbase, I'm really excited to think about like mobile experience and how we can make Bitcoin the easiest thing to use on the mobile side, which can lead to like developing countries.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm on the Coinbase legal team. I'm an attorney here on our awesome legal team. My background, I actually started in marketing and then realized that I wanted to deal with like the business, especially international transactional side of the law. And actually, one of my first ever internships was at a company where I realized how difficult it was for a small business to succeed, from everything to like what signs you're allowed to have on the street side to how you do marketing. There were all these rules that they kept running up against, and it was like, man, how can you ever succeed when there's so many rules? You don't even know you might be breaking them. So I went to law school and worked in, around the time I graduated was kind of in the wake of the 2008 financial crisis, and turns out the only real legal jobs at the time had to do with financial stuff. So I did litigation for a little bit, but that kind of led me into my interest in digital currencies and finance more broadly, and eventually here at Coinbase.
I'm Kristen, and I work on our business development team here at Coinbase. I do a lot of our strategy work and partnerships. So what that looks like at Coinbase is we have quite a few different partners, a lot in the financial service space. So USA Bank is not only one of our investors, but they also have an API integration that lets you view your Coinbase Bitcoin balance, so you can look at it as part of your entire portfolio. Those are sort of the partnerships we work on. And then we think a lot about how can we bring Bitcoin to more people? How can we encourage consumer adoption and offer financial inclusion for more people around the world? So that's a lot of what I'm thinking about and working on here. Prior to Coinbase, I was at an oil and gas company in Houston, so took a big step in a totally different direction. But when I found out about Bitcoin, I really couldn't stop thinking about it, and learned that it was going to be one of the largest changes in my lifetime. So I wanted to get involved early.
Awesome. And my name is Preeti, and I'm an engineer on the wallet team here at Coinbase. I just joined actually like about a month ago, so pretty new, still learning the ropes. My background, so I went to USC for undergrad, and then I have a kind of a somewhat history in finance. I worked at Goldman Sachs for a year doing investment banking, and then I worked at Andreessen Horowitz for 2 years. I was a partner there, helping them choose investments and make investments, and that's how I actually found out about Coinbase, because we invested in Coinbase a couple years ago. And then when I transitioned over to engineering, I kind of I felt like there's something about finance that really caught me. It's not that I didn't like the finance part of it, but I wanted to be part of the technological part of the finance, and Coinbase felt like the perfect match of it because it uses my previous finance skills as well as like my new engineering skills, and it combines them both into like a new skill set I can use. So I'm here, and yeah, let's get ready with the questions. So as I said, like Bitcoin is like more than a new form of money, right? It's like a protocol for exchanging value over the internet, and it's peer-to-peer and completely open. And there's a lot of that's obviously been written about Bitcoin, of all the different kinds of use cases like remittances, micropayments, donations. There's a lot of cases that you can think of. So I think all of us came to Coinbase with different reasons for what really excited us about disrupting finance. So I'd love to ask you, like, what excited you about disrupting finance?
Okay, so when I first joined, they asked me this question in my interview, and I was like, well, 2 years ago when I first heard about Bitcoin, I was really, really excited because I can send my mom money without all the trouble I go through. So how we sent money to each other for like allowance and gifts were like we put it in aluminum foil so that you don't get caught by the and then you put it in a box and you tape it to like a cracker or something, so it looks like it was like a package or envelope on top of the cracker. That's cheaper and faster than like a lot of the situations because my mom's an American citizen living in Korea, and so she can't open a PayPal account, she can't open a bank account, and so this is like the fastest way. And I'm like, why is it so like this in this age? And I thought Bitcoin could be a way to solve that. Coming here, though, that's still an exciting aspect, remittance. But I'm really now excited about bringing Bitcoin and digital currency to the developing countries. So as Kristen mentioned, like inclusion in finance, where a child in a certain country where they've never seen a bank can have a bank for the first time in our mobile app. That would be really, really exciting for me.
Yeah, for me, in addition to sort of the high level excitement over the global payments as Jane described, the sort of more tangible aspects, going back to my early lawyering days where I was litigating in connection with a lot of what went down in what resulted in the 2008 financial crisis. And part of what I learned through that process is how inefficient as well as not transparent our existing financial system is. So while I think in a lot of ways I'm most excited about the things that Jane described, I'm also really excited about, like, for example, ACH is actually not that efficient. We have services like Venmo that make it seem like we're sending money immediately, but really in the background, it's taking several days and there's a lot of fraud involved, and that system is actually just not that easy to navigate. And it only gets more and more complicated and less transparent the more you go into more complicated financial products. A lot of what I was working on dealt with like investment advisors working on large portfolios. And so for me, one of the most exciting things about disrupting fintech or using fintech to sort of disrupt financial systems is an increase in not only the efficiency, but also the transparency in our existing financial system.
So the Big Short won't happen again.
Let's hope.
Boy, it does. Yeah, I will second Sarah's thoughts on that. I actually tried to use my Bank of America account to send money to my roommate on a recurring basis who also has a Bank of America account, and they wouldn't let me do it. I was like, this is the easiest feature. It's not hard. It's not difficult. We have it on our website. Add it. And so I think that is what makes me the most excited about disrupting the financial service industry. It is so centralized that there's been no opportunity for innovation. And we've seen this, actually the buildup over the last few years has been incredible between Airbnb and Uber and disrupting a lot of these industries that really needed it. And so the innovation just floods in as soon as you're able to do that. And I think this is something we see in the financial service area where every government has a good hold on what's going on, but they're not interoperable between countries. And it's really the foundation of a lot of our lives. Without a bank account, how can you purchase a house? How can you pay for food? How can you get credit? None of those things are available to the majority of the world. And it's a difficult challenge because the industry moves so slowly. So with the technology that Bitcoin offers, you actually have the ability to completely disrupt that and offer a better opportunity, not only for everybody who wants to do recurring payments on Bank of America, but also in any area of the world.
Awesome, thank you. Kind of like piggybacking on that topic of like disrupting old archaic industries. So like, I think this has been a theme in many, many startups in Silicon Valley, especially, that are trying to like pull out like entrenched companies. Like examples are, I'm not sure if you would know of Salesforce, but there's another company called RelateIQ that was trying to completely disrupt Salesforce, and it's extremely hard to do it. And they ended up actually getting acquired by Salesforce. It's like Salesforce is a monster in the industry. It's impossible to almost disrupt them at this point unless you have something really, really valuable. So, what are some of the biggest roadblocks, in your opinion, of like disrupting finance as like a startup like us with 100 people? Like, what are some of the roadblocks there?
So I'll talk to kind of what I do on a daily basis, and then you guys can add on to like the other challenges, because as a company we face so many challenges, both that were known to the financial industry, but also like so new and foreign because we're in the new space like of Bitcoin, and that's scary, that's very fraudulent, and all the bad people use it. So I remember my best friend, when she heard that I was going to join Coinbase, she was like, "Isn't that illegal stuff? Like, why are you doing that?" So it's just like, if you're moved away from Silicon Valley, like, and explain that you're working on Bitcoin, it's really hard to get like acceptance, and kind of you don't get the oh wow, you're doing Silicon Valley things. So that's a big roadblock, but they can add more to it. I'll discuss it more from like a mobile standpoint. Creating a mobile experience for providing Bitcoin and digital currency to all our users is like a huge balancing act between trying to create the best user experience, but then Bitcoin's really, really difficult to understand. So how do we make sure those two things are happening at once? How do we make sure that all these payment methods that we want to add, like the banks and SEPA and all these things I've never heard about, we want to make sure that those are included, yet it's the same flow. So if you think about the finance right now, it's very centralized to a specific country. So in the US, we use ACH. In Europe, they use SEPA. And then in X country, they don't even have banks. So how do we make sure that everyone who's going to use our app, which can be in every single country, can use the same but still enjoy the benefit of their own system? So that's one of the bigger challenges that we have. And the last one is like very much fraud. So I'm so excited. Okay, like Jane, we're going to do this project and we're going to add XYZ payments to all our customers. And then I'm like, okay, this is what it's going to look like. We talk to designers. They come up with all these designs. And I'm like, that's going to look really, really good. About like 2 days later, fraud comes back like, okay, so we're going to have to add this step and this step if they are fraudulent to this degree. If they're fraudulent to this degree, we're going to have to do 2 more hoops to get through this. And I'm like, okay, that's going to make our user flow like 10 times longer than it was. We're going to lose a lot of users. So like those are the worries that I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And that's the biggest like roadblocks I find on a mini level.
Probably not surprisingly, the biggest roadblocks that I run into are more on the regulatory and legal front. For a little bit of background of what the different products are that Coinbase offers, we have a buy and sell service. So if you want to buy Bitcoin from us or sell Bitcoin to us, you can do that in transactions directly with Coinbase. We also have a hosted wallet service where you can go in and you can track and manage and store your Bitcoin. You can also use it to send and receive Bitcoin. And then on top of that, we also have an exchange trading platform. So if I decide, hey, I want to buy 1 Bitcoin for $100, and Jane's also on the platform, and she says, I want to sell 1 Bitcoin if the price hits $500, then Coinbase has a platform that will match our orders. And so involved in all of this are really interesting funds flows. And what regulators really care about are how funds are flowing from one person to the next. In some cases, it's tied to what their identity is, and that's more from the compliance angle of avoiding money laundering and terrorist financing. But there's also a lot of consumer protection implications. So are we providing the right disclosures? Are we showing fees at the right point in time? Are we letting users know, hey, here's our regulator in Texas that you should call if you're still dissatisfied with Coinbase services? Is it only 1 click away? Because Texas has a rule that says it has to be only 1 click away. So in addition to finding all of the rules, there are also a number of roadblocks of incorporating them into the products that Jane works on and works really hard to make the user experience useful and informative, and then also throw a wrench into all of that and say, well, and by the way, we need to make sure we're providing all of these disclosures and all of these fee notices. And I think that's probably true of every company that's working in fintech, whether that's related to Bitcoin and blockchain technology or whether that's peer-to-peer lending. And in the US, it's especially difficult because not only do we have federal regulators, but we also have state-level regulators. A friend of mine who has a Bitcoin-based startup out of Argentina recently said that one of his investors asked, when are you going to launch in the US? And he said, never, at least not in the near future, because launching a financial product in the United States is kind of like trying to launch a financial product in 50 different countries. So those are largely the roadblocks to disrupting fintech that I run into.
Yeah, I think those are really good examples. And I would say one thing we talk about here is how we can help bridge Finance 1.0, so everything we do today with your current banks, ACH, to what we think of as Finance 2.0, which is borderless and the ability to execute self-executing contracts on their own to enter into agreements with people where code is actually the underlying agreement. And so in that, there's a lot that comes into, we are now have our hands tied behind our backs at some point in time to meet all of the finance 1.0 requirements. And then moving into 2.0, we see this unlimited opportunity. And that's actually where I find the largest difficulty, the biggest hurdle is customer adoption. We have 4 million customers on our platform. Bitcoin is, as Jane said, widely known in this area. But how do you change an entire world who has viewed money as being backed by a government? Because people look at Bitcoin and they say, oh, but who guarantees it? But how does it work? And then when you get into the technical weeds, there's a lot of it. And so I think when we look at this, we say, how can we make sure that customer adoption is happening, and how do we change the views of everybody in the world? And so that's really what I look at as the biggest hurdle. And I will say that we see the internet, and I personally don't know how TCP/IP protocol works, but I still use the internet because it's useful. And we see that future for Bitcoin, but it takes an entire world of people to change their viewpoints, and on something that is fundamental to who we are, because money changed the way we all interacted with each other. It gave us an opportunity to trust each other, because I knew if you had money, that money was good for me. And money is just a common belief. So in the same way, we're moving towards a world where the common belief is actually in technology and in trusting an underlying computer system that's distributed around the world. So that's what I see.
That's awesome. I totally agree. I think educating a group of people who are so used to the existing monetary system on believing in a whole new way of transacting is like incredibly difficult. And we're probably one of the first startups that are in this ecosystem trying to do it. And it's such an interesting process to watch, because like we're like the trailblazers in this. And so kind of going along this train of thought, Bitcoin as like and the blockchain ecosystem overall, like 2014 was like all hype. It was like, oh yeah, Bitcoin is going to change the world. It's the best thing in the world. And like everyone came up with all these articles, and media came up with all these like things to talk about. And then 2015, it was kind of like a lull in the ecosystem. Not many people talked about it as much. And then now you're seeing the price rise up again with Ethereum coming out and all this cool stuff starting to pop up back again. So with all these like ups and downs in the industry, what do you think like makes Coinbase well positioned to kind of get through these storms? Like how have you been able to weather these storms?
Yeah, so I think the same thing that frustrates me on a daily basis is actually the reason why we're standing here today. Before I joined, like I saw a series of Bitcoin companies, both exchanges and small companies, just got a business all of a sudden from being like the biggest thing on the news to like dying the next day. And it was like all due to security problems and fraudulent problems. And our team is like, we have such a solid security team, solid internal tools for fraud. And because we take those measures as well as legal and compliance, and because we take those measures, like, and because that makes my job a little harder, like because we do that, like we're able to be here today and provide such a strong network for people to buy and sell Bitcoin. And I'm really proud of that. Like that's what I try to remind myself every day when I'm like, why is this taking like 5 times longer, although it should be a very simple thing? Because we have to make sure the copy's good, we have to make sure that the fraudulent scores are good for these customers, all these like constraints that I have. It's actually the reason why I'm able to do these features. So I think like it's all due to our entire team.
It's a balancing act.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think to answer the question of why is Coinbase still here through the history that it's seen and what positions us well to continue, if I had to give just one answer, I would honestly say it's the people. We have a really motivated team of our group of people, regardless of what team they're on, and that's everything from the awesome people who work on putting this office together so that we have food and snacks and drinks, to the engineers who try really hard to make the best user experience, to the designers who help that process, to the more compliance side of like making sure we are reporting when we need to report court, and we have relationships with regulators when we need to have relationships with regulators. It takes a lot of different people doing a lot of different functions to make all of that work. And I've been really privileged to work with everyone here at Coinbase on that project. But on the as kind of the follow-up thought and relevant to work I do here, I think Coinbase's regulatory relationship and regulatory strategy has also been extremely helpful. It's really difficult and really scary to regulators when the only thing you've ever heard about a technology is Mt. Gox, where a ton of money got stolen, or it's Silk Road, where it was all drug dealers and hitmen. And you walk into the room and you say, you know, but we're really good. And how do you make them believe that? And part of what's interesting about that process is, I think if I ask by show of hands, who knows what 2FA is, probably everyone in this room would raise their hand. And I was recently at a conference with the regulators who deal with a lot of financial technologies and different companies, including sort of the legacy payment rails like Western Unions of the world. And in one of the slides was a reference to 2FA, and in a question afterwards, someone else in the room was like, "What does 2FA mean?" And so it kind of puts in context when you walk into a room and you're like, "Let me tell you about Bitcoin and why it's really cool and why we're doing really cool things with it." A lot of times the regulators they're very reactive by nature, and so they're probably at least a step behind what everyone in the Silicon Valley or just disrupting finance generally is thinking or doing. And so I think the fact that Coinbase has had, since long before even my time here, a really strong regulatory strategy and strong priority of working with regulators and within the bounds of the law has positioned us well to weather storms in the past as well as continue into the future.
Totally agree. The people here are awesome. But Jeb, the dog, agrees with me too. When I think about the problems that we've encountered here, it has been an evolution. I've been here for almost 2 years now, and there were days when we would come to work and something in the ecosystem was just, the price was up or the price was down, or some new announcement came out or some regulation came out, and it was like all hands on deck, and everyone was like, okay, we've got to figure it out. So when I talk about the ups and downs, I mean, I'm not going to lie, they've been hard sometimes. There were things that broke that really sucked that we had to fix. And we did it by persevering a lot of the times. And I think we do that every day. Like Preeti said, you look back to 2013, there was this huge, everyone thought Bitcoin was going to be the next big thing in the next 6 months. And, you know, fast forward 3 years and it's not. So we persevere every day when we come to work, and we keep pushing towards a big goal, changing the way people view money. And that's really what got us through a lot of the ups and downs. But there were crazy days. I wish I had a good story for you guys now. Do you guys have any big things? No? Hurdles? I think we'll talk about, there was in the digital currency space recently, upset with something called the DAO, which is in the Ethereum digital currency. And it was tough, right? Because somebody went in, they hacked the DAO and basically stole Ethereum. And so now we have to think about quickly I have to think about who I communicate to as my partners. Who does Sarah communicate to on the regulatory side? How do we communicate to our customers what happened and what we're doing to look at it? So every time something happens in the industry, it can be crazy times around here. But I know that our perseverance is something that's just kept that through.
I agree. The people here are like absolutely amazing. And I think what really stands out about Coinbase versus most of the startups I've seen is, like, I think everyone truly believes in what they're doing and the product and the end vision. And like, I love how the founders always say, like, we're only 1% of the way there. We still have a long way to go. And I think that makes us feel like this is a long-term battle that we're all like fighting, or war, I guess. And And I guess like moving on to the next question, like we all came to Coinbase sort of with different sort of interests because we have different positions and different roles. So for example, I was interested in the user experience side and the website, and how could we make the wallet so good that we can increase user adoption and make it increase the use cases for a user to use Coinbase. So that was one of my motivations for joining Coinbase and figuring out like the user side of it and user adoption side of it. I'm just curious to hear what you guys joined, what interested you in joining Coinbase and what excites you about being here.
Okay. I'm trying to think about the points I haven't talked about because like I said, the decentralized finance system for developing countries is still exciting for me, as well as remittance is exciting. But really, we talk about this all the time in our like all hands, but we are building like the finance 1.0 to like 2.0 bridge that Kristen mentioned. And what excites me is like, how can we make sure while we're building that bridge, we build a desire for people to cross that bridge? And I think some of the answers, it's up in the air, like we're trying to find it ourselves. But sometimes, like I really think that bringing it to countries that have no financial system right now, and it's just so new that anything is acceptable to them. Like in different countries, they have skipped the kind of technological jump from like using a bank to now they just only use mobile, or having no bank to having only a mobile bank. And so without a computer, these people are using their mobile phones to transacting their payments, to pay for bills and things like that. So I think that can be a way to increase the desires for people to cross that bridge. So what excites me is like, not only are we building the bridge, we have to think about ways to get people from one point to the other. And that's not just building it. So that's what's really exciting to me. And yeah, I think we have the right people to do that.
Yeah, thinking similarly of what I haven't mentioned already. In terms of what brought me to Coinbase, I hit a point where that just kind of touching on my personal life, I was in DC for 6 years and it was not my favorite place. It was fine, but I hit a point where I was like, I've been talking about moving to California for 5 of the last 6 years, and I simultaneously got really excited about Bitcoin, kind of discovered it and really kind of understood what its potential was for the first time. And the law firm I was with at the time was structured such that I had a really high incentive to bring in my own clients. So I had kind of been taught how to do client onboarding, and it was just sort of the perfect storm where I said, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to start taking clients in California, and I'm going to move there, and I'm going to start my own law practice. And then to the extent I can, I'm going to focus on companies that are working in Bitcoin and sort of this blockchain financial disruption space. And that really only lasted a couple of months before Coinbase was like, hey, we like what you're doing, and we want you to come do it here. So that's kind of what brought me here. And I think for every lawyer, what you're constantly trying to do is fit something of a square peg into a round hole. You're always taking your unique set of facts and looking at a static law and trying to figure out exactly how the two fit together in the way that best works for your client. And that's certainly true here as ever. And I think what's really exciting about it here is that it's not only an area of law that's really interesting to me and kind of a project that I have a lot of like personal interest and personal satisfaction in seeing it succeed. But on top of that, it's also really one of the roundest pegs and one of the squarest holes when you're talking about finance and how to fit this technology that did not exist when most of the laws were written. And so figuring out, how exactly is what you're doing fit within a payment instrument law, because I don't really think of payment instruments when I think of Bitcoin. And so I think that's been the most interesting thing that both brought me in and has kept me really excited and interested in things I get to work on.
Awesome.
Yeah, so aside from everything else I've already said about all the reasons I'm here, the reason I pulled the trigger and joined Coinbase was all about the culture. So I'm going to sort of step aside from the Bitcoin piece of it. And, we don't have to dance around it. Most of us are women here. Some of us aren't, and that's fine. But the culture here was so inviting and inclusive and open. And that's what really helped me change my mind about coming here, moving across the country, and going into an industry that everyone thought I was crazy for doing so. And so to talk a little bit about what our culture looks like, we have 2 founders who know that the most important thing is happy people for productive people. And they created an entire, what we have a people operation group whose focus is to make sure that our day in and day out time here is productive. And if anything isn't, we all have open feedback loops where we can go and talk to any manager or the founder or any peer and say, look, this is what's going on. This is how it made me feel. Let's find a solution to this. And it's open and there's nothing hidden. Previously at an oil and gas company, I could be so mad at my boss for doing something and would never walk down the hall to HR because that was just frowned on. And how could you disagree with what a manager had to say? And here it's like, absolutely. You disagree with us? Please do it more because that's the only way we're all going to get better. So let's all move forward. And it's okay if it hurts. And it's okay if the things you say, we try not to hurt each other's feelings, but, it's okay if we have to have hard conversations. And they set up, kudos to our entire people operations who set up a perfect framework for us to have that. And if anyone has questions or, thinking about how you can offer the same sort of opportunity in your company or culture, it didn't just happen. It's happened over a long period of time, and it's something that a lot of people have built up. It's come from the founders, and it's come from managers and individual contributers. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me. Natalie is also one of our directors, and you'll see a few people in purple shirts. So check in with them because one thing that I'm very passionate about is building a good and easy place to work. It's where I spend most of my time. And that's something that I have never seen at another company except Coinbase, and it's the reason I came here.
Awesome. Thank you. And then one final question, it's going to be non-Bitcoin, non-blockchain, non-finance, is what are some of your favorite ways to geek out? I can start if that's fine. So one of the things I do is I love learning about operating systems for some reason, and so I stole all of my boyfriend's operating system books, and I read them as my bedtime reading. It's super nerdy, but something about it really fascinates me, and I just read through textbooks about operating systems just to learn about it because I like to.
Okay. Yeah, so I play Dota a lot. Yeah.
What do I geek out about? I think there are probably two areas I geek out a lot about. One is I'm really big into consignment and thrift store shopping. So whether that's finding a new website that does consignment or finding new places, it's the most exciting thing ever. And the other thing is I really geek out about running to the point where I'm really passionate about shoes and about the wearables and about which app you use to track all of that data. And I guess I'm just into running data.
So I feel like I'd have to define what geek is. Geek is only geek if you compare it to something else, and I don't know. It's hard to describe that. My geek out. So things that I'm passionate about. Is that okay? All right, sweet. Diversity and inclusion, as I just said. And then, I don't know, man. Sarah and I go running sometimes.
True story.
Yeah. I don't know. I like fast cars too, and motorcycles, which I'm not sure is a geek thing, but it feels geeky.
That's good. Kristen, why don't you tell us about your most recent fast car experience?
I might have gotten a ticket when I was driving my coworker's Tesla over 100 miles an hour. That was my bad. But it was, geeky.
Awesome. I think that's all we had for questions from us, but we're opening up the floor to any Q&A that you guys might have for us. Wow.
I have a catch box here, so I will go ahead and give it to the closest person.
Hi, I have a question. Do you personally invest in Bitcoin, any other digital currency? And second question, as a Coinbase, what do you do to avoid what happened to Mt. Gox?
What's the second question?
What do you do in Coinbase to avoid what happened to Mt. Gox?
Oh, to Mt. Gox. I can take number one if you want number two.
Sure.
So yes, I invest in Bitcoin as well as in Ethereum partially. I think we all look at this, broadly speaking, as a larger, longer opportunity. So my investment, it's not something I watch every day and I look whether it's going up and down. I know that because I work here. But in the long term, it's a part of my portfolio as just another diversified asset, and one that actually you can look at it, it runs counter to when China puts in capital controls or when Greece fails, the Bitcoin price jumps up. So it's actually been really interesting to watch it work differently than my portfolio.
Yeah, and so the second question of how do you avoid being Mt. Gox, I will preface this by saying I'm an attorney, and if you have any security questions, I'm happy to introduce you to someone on our security team after. But there are a couple of things. For those of you who aren't familiar, Mt. Gox experienced a massive hack about 2.5 years ago, and it was there's speculation over whether or not it was an inside job, but basically a bunch of people lost their Bitcoin and whatever funds they held on the platform. So there's a number of things we do to ensure that that won't happen. We have the majority of our Bitcoin and Ethereum is actually stored offline in what's considered cold storage. So it's basically not hackable. The insurance we do store online, the Bitcoin we do store online, we have insurance for, so we have hot wallet insurance. And there are also a number of pieces of technology that we've implemented to rotate keys to make the hot storage harder to steal. We also keep a lot of tight controls on an infrastructure level of who has access to what, and what things need like a +1 or a more than a +1 from other people of the team. So there are a great multitude of things that we do to take security very seriously, but that's about at my cap of what I usually tell regulators. So.
Other question?
Oh, hi. The thing of educating people for this whole concept of finance 2.0 has been mentioned so many times. So I wonder what Coinbase has tried to ways you guys have tried to educate people and to engage user. As a follow-up of that question, after adding some users, you would like to keep the user engaged. So what ways have you guys tried for user engagement? Thanks.
That's a really good question. I think that's something, I think we've kind of focused the last several years on building a strong foundation. And so like marketing and PR and that kind of user types of blog posts and stuff haven't been a huge focus yet, but it's certainly something that we're starting to do and something that we will definitely start to focus more on. So I think that's probably what I can say. I think we can definitely do a better job of educating the consumer and like figuring out like what different use cases people are using the platform for and targeting specific users for that platform. I just feel like we're so focused on building a strong foundation before we can do that yet, because like the foundation is so important for this long, like I don't know how many year journey, and that's just like probably the next phase in our journey.
To like add on top of that, while we're building the foundation, like we make sure that everything we do is easy to understand. If I had to explain blockchain and Bitcoin to somebody, like I would doubt like a lot of people get it, since like I'm not the most knowledgeable either, and explaining it to somebody else, like it would just cause headache. And so instead, like what we're trying to mimic is like what you're most comfortable with, and okay, I want to send this much money to this person. You can do that functionality just without huge onboarding, without huge marketing, explaining a lot of things. And another thing is we have a really great customer support team. I think we're really pretty happy and proud of our customer support team. So if people are confused or lost, they're always there answering, and sometimes less than an hour, and it's pretty top-notch customer support. I think that's one. For user engagement, we have a feature that I actually built for price alerts. That was, I don't know if you guys know, but when we do our interviews, we have this thing called work trial, and you come in for 2 to 5 days and you work trial and see if you like the company as well as if they like you. During that 5 days, I built this thing called price alerts, and it's a high feature during the volatile days of prices. I honestly use it a lot more during that time too, although I built it. So I think that's for engagement. We try to think of organic, natural ways since we are building the foundation and making sure that those tools are really built well.
Okay, so I have 2 questions actually. One, that a lot of startups in Silicon Valley.
Sorry, can you hold the box to your face?
Okay.
The microphone.
So basically, to cut it short, can you receive salary in a Bitcoin at the Coinbase? Nice, yes. Nice, that's good part. And the other part is I'm very concerned about the node size community issues. It's about we're almost at the capacity, and if the size is going to increase, then there are potential for fraud. And I wonder if Coinbase doing something to bring Bitcoin community to the agreement.
Yes, yeah, I'll start. Yes, we can get our salaries in Bitcoin, and I did that for a while. I think a lot of us have. I switch it off every once in a while. And then secondly, to your question, which is what's coming up, what's been happening, it's called the block size debate. So the question is, we have to increase the block size because there's so many transactions that are happening. So with that increase of block size, it actually means that only fewer and fewer people can actually do the mining, the verification of transactions. So as you make the block size bigger, as you include more transactions, only fewer and fewer people can actually verify those. And the difficulty with that is Bitcoin was meant to be decentralized. It was meant to be distributed. So that's the current debate going on. And Coinbase has put a lot of work and time into talking with the community, helping us come to a conclusion on that, helping Bitcoin Core to work on different problems. And actually, Brian Armstrong has a great Medium post out there that really gets into the details of what he's trying to work on. I don't think they've come to a conclusion. I'm not sure they will, but I speak on this sometimes. I really love this because it's a perfect debate, right? It's a debate that the community gets to make a decision on, and then we get to see what happens. It's the first time that we're there's going to be some interest, and there's definitely hard times when you get a new technology and a democratic vote where the community gets to decide, do we want to increase fees on people or do we want to centralize mining? I don't know. We'll see what happens when it goes one way or the other. And we've done a lot of work and we've advocated and put our place out there, but it's really up to the community to adopt it or not. And if they don't, we'll just see what happens.
Hi, I have the conch. Okay, so I have kind of 2 questions. One is, you mentioned regulatory affairs, auditors. Did you find that you have to kind of teach them how to audit you or how to change the way they approach things because of the nature of Coinbase, digital currency, or is it all kind of settled down by now? And the second kind of question I have is, because of the nature of your business, do you find that the current CRMs or sales management tools fit your needs, or have you had to kind of tweak things to make things work the way you do? Or do you have your own tools?
Yeah, I'm happy to tackle that one. From the regulatory standpoint, it's actually interesting and something that I think has evolved over at least my time at Coinbase, where very early on, I think we took more of the approach of, we want you to like us, and we were not we just were here's what we're doing, and we want you to know it and understand it. And it was more, we didn't so much have the approach of, let us teach you how you should regulate us. It's something that as we've built trust, and also just as those relationships have developed and we've realized, wait, we actually think about this way more than they do. And so it doesn't even need to feel like this hostile or uncomfortable relationship. It's actually an area where we spend a lot of time thinking about this and we have a lot of knowledge, so let's share it. And so I think there's been a shift over time as the relationships have developed where we become more comfortable and articulate in sharing it, and also our regulatory relationships, our regulators get more comfortable hearing it from us because they've known us for a while and they trust us more, and they now know that we're not, we're at least trying to follow the rules. And figure out how the rules ought to apply to us. So now I think the default has actually shifted to where, in general, we will say, if we have a report due or something, we will say, here's what we think you want us to report on, here's a memo of it, and here are the numbers. If you have questions, let us know, or if you want different data, let us know. And then, so that, like, I guess that's been like the shift of the regulatory focus. On the standpoint of tools, I can at least speak to the ones we work with. From the standpoint of, I guess we use a number of tools here, from Jira, and we use actually Google Calendar for a lot of our calendar events, or remembering deadlines. A lot of those types of things have been very useful and have helped increase efficiencies and increase cross-team communications. From the standpoint of the regulatory reporting, where it's a little bit of we're figuring out what it is we need to report there, I don't think there are systems that exist, particularly not for Bitcoin companies. I think we're one of about 2 companies who have widespread money transmission licenses. So I guess the answer to that question is it depends which part of the business we have to build ourselves versus we're able to use tools.
Hi, my name is Janisa. So you talked a lot about how you're trying to expand Coinbase to other countries, and especially with the ever-changing markets of finances in the US. How can you potentially create a strategy to bring Coinbase to other countries, especially in underdeveloped places which may already be struggling with technology to begin with?
Yeah, we've put a lot of thought into that. We have a strategy, most importantly. So this is difficult because of the fragmentation as well. You don't just have one developing world with one common problem. You actually have so many around. And one way that we work to solve that's already available is we have an open API. So our API lets you link in, and if you want to do a Coinbase buy or a Coinbase sell, you can actually do it through our API, and you can have our customers OAuth into your application. So let's say you build an application in any developing country you want, and you say, I have this really great idea, but I don't have the foundation, I don't have the infrastructure, I don't know how to access the Bitcoin network. Well, we've already done all that for you, and it's all there, and it's packaged. We actually have these our API team just built a buy widget. So all you have to do is come through our compliance program, get approval, and we'll help through that process. And then you can let your customers just buy Bitcoin right there with a debit or a credit card. It's awesome. So our goal is to create the foundation and the infrastructure for other people to build in the developing world. We also work in very specific areas, coming up with opportunities to reach the customers there. But I will say that we worked first on a scalable solution that would allow the community to do it themselves.
Yeah, and then that's the bigger kind of game that we're playing. And then on the internal side, like we make sure just tiny little things like our Android app, we make sure that it's smaller than a certain amount of megabytes so that all developing countries can run this. We think about how we make our network calls so that it's not as slow if you're in a country where it's not common to have data. So we just think of a lot of those small things on a day-to-day basis. And like hackathons and things like that, we always think about cool projects we can do on the side that will help make sure that developing countries can use our product.
Why do you have whiskey in women's bathroom? And why it's empty? Actually, I have a real question. I would like to ask who are the competitors of Coinbase, and do you actually cooperate with them to create understanding what is Bitcoin, how to spread it? Do you cooperate with them at all?
Sure. I'm probably in the best place in the company that actually does that. Also, we have whiskey in the women's bathroom because we thought it was funny.
And the guys' bathroom had it first.
Yeah, the male's bathroom has it first, so then we added it to the females. It was a whole joke when we started here. I hope everyone got a good laugh. So to answer your question, who are our competitors? We have a few competitors in all of the spaces we work. So for our wallet and the ability to buy and sell Bitcoin easily, Circle is one of our largest competitor, I would say. On our advanced trading platform, Gemini is one of our competitors, and that was founded by the Winklevoss twins. It's a very dynamic industry, and so we actually do cooperate. There's a lot of groups that get together, and they have alliances that are working towards educating people, educating regulators, and so we work across the board with all of them. There's Bitcoin meetups and Ethereum meetups that we go to. I wouldn't say that there's just one group we're cooperating in, but across the board, all of them. But there are a lot of competitors in the space and lots of people doing great things. We really encourage it.
Hi, so my question is, during everyone's time at Coinbase, have you been able to contribute anything to move the U.S. financial landscape towards the 2.0, whether it's influencing regulatory practice, changing consumer behavior? Like, what are the successes that you've achieved and how'd you do it?
That's a great question.
Thank you.
Anyone have an answer off the top of their head?
I guess I can speak to a lot of the work that I've done to date has been the state level regulatory engagement, and there have been a lot of times the wins that we have are the like no news stories, like no news is good news. And so I think one of the coolest things we've been able to do on a state level is convince most states to not do what New York did with their bit license regulation. They basically made a set of regulations that I don't think, I'm quite certain they don't even fully understand or know what to do with. And from before they ever finalized those regulations, we were engaged in saying, look, you're thinking about it the wrong way. A lot of what we do has a lot of similarities. Again, going to the square peg round hole, like this one actually isn't that different. Like when you have a PayPal wallet, you have a USD wallet. When you have a Bitcoin wallet, it's just a different denominated wallet. And I think the fact that no other state has kind of taken what is in many ways an egregious regulatory standpoint has been a victory for a lot of our efforts.
Awesome. Well, I know there are a lot more questions out here, but let's start by giving a huge round of applause for our panel. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Please continue to stick around. We have a bunch of Coinbasers in the back row who are happy to answer questions, as is our panel. There is more refreshments, so please stick around. And shameless plug, we are hiring, so if you want to email talent@coinbase.com, we will be sure to get back to you. Have a good night.